Welcome to this session on adapting model curricula to meet program needs. Our learning target for this session is that you would be able to adapt or use model curriculum in both student and teacher programs. We have 5 model curricula now. Our newest one was just posted this last week. So you see Animal Friends, Let's Go Somewhere, which is written both at the novice and at the intermediate level. Our Identities here and there, which was revised quite a bit this year to make it more current with the times, and a content-based unit, our Ecological Footprint. So when you think about a curriculum template and why we even have them, we've given student programs a curriculum template that knowing that with a common development process, then it would be easier to share units, instructional strategies, and quality materials. The common template also makes it possible for teacher programs to use the content of a curriculum in different ways in their teacher programs where they may be working with participants to design units of instruction. So this particular session pulls from implementing a standards-based and thematically organized curriculum. It draws on the STARTALK principal infographic, which you can find on the STARTALK website. And when we talk about this common curriculum template, we know that all of the curricula is backward designed, and that we ask that that curriculum overview description addresses some key questions about the theme. Is it clear? Does it allow for integration of the World Readiness Standards? Does it give a reason, a context for purposeful communication? Does it integrate culture, content, and language? Is it appropriate for the age and proficiency of the learners? And is it of interest to them, age appropriate and of interest? We also ask that all STARTALK programs use the Necessful, Actful, Can-Do statements to identify the proficiency range of their students as novice, intermediate, or advanced, but more importantly, to pick the performance indicators for this particular curriculum. So identifying whether they will be functioning at novice high, intermediate low, within that range. And that sets common expectations for the development of program can-do statements, performance assessment tasks, and lesson can-do statements. We think there are 3 options for adapting curriculum. One is to level the performance range for your learners. So we'll look at an example of that. One is to identify program can-do statements that are just very similar to what you had already planned to do within your program. And a third would be to take a program can-do statement and just adapt it to make it age appropriate for your learners. Because it's always easier to adapt than it is to create. So we know that it's possible to adapt by performance indicator. So if you look at this particular performance indicator, interpersonal, exchanging information and ideas and conversation, the keywords here are bolded that at novice mid, they take this information and they're using practiced and memorized words and phrases. By novice high, they're using simple sentences most of the time with these questions and familiar topics. By intermediate low, they are in conversation on topics and they're creating simple sentences and they're asking appropriate follow-up questions. By intermediate mid, it's still information and conversations, familiar topics. Maybe they're able to do some research, but now they're creating sentences and series of sentences and asking a variety of questions and follow-up questions. So I can level the performance of a task by where my learners are. So if I look at our identities here and there, and I read this curriculum overview and I see pieces of it that were in my curriculum, I might want to explore a little bit further and look at how this curriculum treated activities or individuals from the target culture, or typical practices and products, or personalities of historical figures, and see if any of those are similar to what I was planning to do. But darn, this curriculum, it got written for novice mid, novice high. The program can-do statement was, I can ask for and give information about personal interest. Okay, well, that's a pretty simple conversation. They're just giving brief sentences about people, places, things, activities. Do you like sports? Do you like ice cream? Personal meaning. And it's scaffolded. They even have a personal interest card to draw on. But I was planning to talk about personal interest. I just need to bump it up. My learners have more language. I'm going to take that up to intermediate low. I know that I have to design for simple sentences and follow-up questions. So now, yeah, I'm asking for and giving information about personal interests, but I'm going to also compare those interests to others. A little bit more reason to talk. And now the task, that interest card, that scaffold is gone. They're interacting with peers to find out how they're similar and different, not just from one another, but also making comparisons to what they know about the target culture, and maybe even offering a simple reason for possible differences. So same idea about interest, bumped it up from a novice mid to an intermediate low. You can also skim and look for the language functions of program can-do statements. So you'll find those function words like want and describe, prefer, have, want, identify, compare, ask for and give, discuss, suggest. And when you hit on a word that you're planning to use, let's look at that middle one on the top. I can ask and answer questions about the animals I and others prefer, have, and want to see. Well, maybe your unit is more about food. You can still have this same notion of prefer, have, want, but you would just change the context. You're asking and answering questions about food and beverages that you prefer and want to try. And then you'll be able to look at, well, what was the performance assessment task? Can I just adapt the task to be about food instead of animals? Can I look at the lesson can-do statements and the suggested checks for learning and just make it be about food instead of animals? So can I take what I can and adapt to meet my needs? And the reason this may be a big time saver is that in the model curricula, you'll find the function words in the lesson can-do statements. And now you will also find that suggested check for learning. So when you get to your learning plan where you're indicating checks for learning, you may be able to say recognize, change the context, slap check works, change the context. So it could be a time saver as you're developing your own curriculum theme. So if we look at this Animal Friends unit, which was originally written by STARTALK to really be a K2 unit, because we recognize that our youngest learners, have different learning needs, different learning styles, age appropriate. They can't quite process as much information as quickly. There's a lot of considerations for K2, but many of our STARTALK programs are K5. So it may be that the Animal Friends unit is what they want to use for all of their learners. And you're looking at the overview and you're saying, I've read the overview. They are going to consider animals that roles play in our lives, and they're going to look at cultural symbols and mascots as well as pets. They're going to maybe go on some virtual field trips or visit webcams to see and describe animals in their natural habitat. They're going to classify by habit, movement, diet, physical characteristics. They're going to talk about their likes and dislikes as well as their pets. They might get into what animals need to survive and why they're endangered and what we can do to help. How do we take that curriculum and make it work for a K-5 audience, or maybe we want to do this in middle school and we just have to make it even more age appropriate. Well, let's think about this as a K-2 learner. I know I can get rid of program can-do statement 1. I can find out where different animals live around the world. Yes, I could teach that vocabulary, but the typical K-2 student is not very aware of the world and maps and geography. So that may not be worth my time in my short summer program. Yes, they might be very concerned about endangered species, but that may be moving them beyond where they are cognitively to actually talk about survival, or maybe even just emotionally. We do not want to introduce that aspect of animals yet. So my K-2 learners are left with 3 program can-do statements. And I will work on those statements with those learners and do all 5 with my older learners. I kept for both K2 and 3-5, I can ask and answer questions to find out what animals are like, how they move, and what they eat. That means I have to write a performance assessment task for that program can-do statement. So in K2, I am just going to select 2 animals and give students a different picture, and then they're going to pair and ask about size and color and move. So what color are you? How big are you? Are you big or small? Do you crawl? Do you fly? Do you eat plants? Do you eat animals? Very simple, memorized questions. But in grades 3 through 5, I still want them to do the same thing: size, color, etc. But this time it's going to be 6 different animals, and we're going to structure it so it's more of a version of 20 questions, and I'm going to give them choice about the animal they select, and it's going to be a guessing game, and a lot more language is going to come into that, a lot more interaction and more choice, because now we're working with being more discerning in our questions in order to figure out which animal out of 6 instead of out of 2. We're constantly trying to remind programs of less is more. How many program can-do statements should we have? We do not have the right answer for you. We just want to remind you that if you write 6 program can-do statements, you will have 6 performance assessment tasks, and that will probably result in 30 or more lesson can-do statements. And if you watch the other session on being thoughtful about learning sequences, we talk about some of the complications of having that number of lesson can-do statements. But save time where you can. You're all extremely busy people, and for many of you, it's going to be a very different summer. So just think, sometimes it really is easier to adapt than create. So peruse the model curricula and see how they might be able to help you with your own curriculum this summer. A reminder here that the model curricula can all be found on the STARTALK website, and STARTALK is a federal grant program that is funded by the National Security Agency and administered by the National Foreign Language Center. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you much success this summer.